When the guns fell silent on the beaches of Normandy, the war in Europe was far from won. Behind the smoke and chaos of battle, another war began. A quieter one, fought not with rifles or tanks, but with engines, sweat, and determination. It was a war of movement. And movement in war depends on one thing: supply. The Allied invasion of France in the summer of 1944 had torn a hole in Hitler's fortress. But now, the armies that surged inland faced a new enemy: distance. The beaches could no longer feed the front. The trucks, the fuel, the food, the ammunition, all had to move forward faster than the retreating Germans. And so, in the shadow of that desperate need, the Red Ball Express was born. It began in August 1944, when the Allied advance was running ahead of its own logistics. Ports were clogged, railways destroyed, and bridges shattered. But the soldiers on the front lines, Patton's tanks, the infantry columns, the artillery crews, could not wait. They needed a lifeline, a road of steel and rubber that would carry the war forward. The name Red Ball came from an old railroad term used for express freight, the fastest, most vital cargo on the line. For the army, it meant one thing: supplies with the highest priority, delivered without delay. Day and night, a river of trucks would soon flow from the beaches of Normandy to the front lines in France. Each carried fuel, food, and ammunition, the lifeblood of the Allied advance. At its peak, the Red Ball Express ran nearly 6,000 vehicles a day, pounding through mud and rubble over 700 miles of open road. And behind those wheels were men, young, often overlooked, and mostly African American. Nearly 3/4 of the Red Ball's drivers were black soldiers serving in segregated units that America had long underestimated. Denied combat roles, they were given trucks. But in those trucks, they carried something greater than cargo. They carried victory itself. They drove through nights without headlights, through bombed-out towns and sniper fire, dodging craters and wreckage, their engines growling under endless loads of fuel and ammunition. Each journey meant risking life and limb, but stopping was never an option. The war could move only as fast as the Red Ball could roll. The roads of France had seen war before, but in the late summer of 1944, they came alive in a way no one could have imagined. For miles upon miles, trucks rolled one after another, a steel procession that never stopped, day or night. Engines thundered through villages still scarred by battle. Headlights were forbidden. Blackout rules meant drivers could see only the dim outline of the road ahead, often guided by the faint glow of the truck in front. The dust was constant, the noise unending. They called it the longest convoy in the world, and it ran on courage as much as gasoline. Each driver knew the stakes. A single breakdown could block hundreds of vehicles. A single missed delivery could halt an army. But still, they pushed on, hour after hour, mile after mile. Many of these men had never driven anything larger than a farm truck back home. Now they were navigating narrow roads under enemy fire, with little sleep and no guarantee of making it back. German planes still prowled the skies, strafing convoys when the weather cleared. Mines and snipers waited along the routes, yet the drivers of the Red Ball Express learned to adapt. They knew every shortcut, every detour, every bridge that could hold one more overloaded truck. They patched their own tires, repaired their own engines, and somehow kept the wheels turning, no matter what. There was a saying among the troops: if the Red Ball stops, the war stops. In time, the route itself became legendary. Marked by red circular signs, it stretched from the beaches of Normandy to the front lines in Chartres, Reims, and eventually into Belgium and beyond. Convoys thundered past each other in both directions, full trucks heading east with supplies and empty ones racing back west for another load. Military police directed traffic non-stop. Mechanics worked in makeshift roadside workshops, sleeping under the stars beside their machines. The Red Ball Express was more than a supply line. It was a living organism, beating with the pulse of war. Every soldier who fought in Europe depended on it, though most never saw the faces behind the wheel. And behind those wheels, history was being rewritten. African American soldiers, so often relegated to the background, were now proving that without them, the war would grind to a halt. They were young, brave, and determined to serve a country that still questioned their place in it. They didn't just drive, they endured. Through fatigue, through prejudice, through the endless dust and danger, they kept the Allied army alive. By the time the Red Ball Express reached its peak in late August, more than 23,000 men and 6,000 trucks were on the road daily. Together, they hauled over 400,000 tons of supplies in just 82 days. It was an achievement few had believed possible, a triumph of organization, grit, and sheer willpower. By autumn of 1944, the Allied armies had pushed deep into France. The German lines were breaking, but the front was now hundreds of miles from the beaches that fed it. Every shell fired, every tank that moved, every meal served to a soldier. It all depended on the Red Ball Express. But the strain was showing. Engines wore out, tires burst. Drivers went days without proper rest. The trucks, many long past their limits, were held together with wire, tape, and hope. Yet still, they rolled. When bridges collapsed, they found fords through rivers. When fuel ran short, they siphoned from one truck to another. And when the enemy struck from the shadows, they drove through the fire and smoke, never stopping. There was no glamour in their mission, no medals for heroism, no cheering crowds. But the soldiers of the Red Ball Express didn't need them. They knew that the weight they carried was the weight of the war itself. General Dwight D. Eisenhower would later say that without the Red Ball Express, the Allies could not have moved, could not have fought, and could not have won. The road was not just a supply line, it was the artery of victory. As the Allies advanced into Belgium and toward the German border, new routes replaced the old Red Ball Highway. Railways reopened, ports were captured, and the great convoys began to slow. By November, the Red Ball Express officially shut down, its mission complete, its legacy secured. In just 3 months, those drivers had done what seemed impossible, feeding a modern army on the move through a shattered continent. When the guns finally fell silent in 1945, the soldiers of the Red Ball Express went home quietly. Many returned to a country that still didn't see them as equals. The world had celebrated the liberators of Europe, but not always the men who kept those liberators moving. Yet history would remember. In the years that followed, generals and historians alike would look back and understand. The Red Ball Express was not only a logistical marvel, it was a testament to unity, endurance, and courage under pressure. It proved that in war, victory does not belong only to those who fight on the front lines, but also to those who labor in the shadows, driving through darkness, guided only by duty and faith. And so, the legend of the Red Ball Express endures. The roar of its engines has long faded, but on the roads of France, echoes still remain. The ghosts of trucks rolling through night fog, their headlights dimmed, their mission unending. A generation of men once carried a world at war on their shoulders, and though they asked for little, they gave everything. The Red Ball Express was the road to victory, a lifeline forged in sweat and steel, and driven by the quiet heroes history nearly forgot.